Today, I want to talk about a topic that I don't really hear many people talk about, and it's a concept I'm gonna call patterns. When it comes to learning how to draw, a lot of people, including me, talk about learning fundamentals such as line control, perspective, and observation. Those things are important and you should practice them, of course, but what's also really important with drawing is being able to recognize patterns and then being able to reproduce those patterns. Drawing from imagination isn't about imagining how something looks and then reproducing that on paper. Instead, it's about remembering a pattern that you've drawn before and then reproducing that pattern. Basically, it's about memorization. It's also about construction, but that's a different story. You cannot draw something from imagination if you haven't drawn that thing before. Then on top of that, objects contain a lot of information. Remembering all of that information is almost impossible, so to make it easier, we can simplify that information to simple patterns. Then all we have to do is reproduce those patterns and we can essentially draw something from imagination. These simple patterns also give us a guide to work with, so now it should be a lot easier to reproduce the complicated information. Another thing is that drawing is also about getting ideas across. Sometimes drawing something perfectly accurately is not the best way to get the idea across. Instead, we can use a pattern that gets this idea across to the viewer. So even though this pattern might not be perfectly accurate, it still creates a better end result. It's also important to note that even though I call these patterns, it doesn't mean that every single drawing will end up looking the exact same. The pattern is basically just a guide. Once you put this down, you can change it however you want. There are a bunch of different types of patterns you can use, and the ones that you use kind of depend on how you want your work to look. While you're practicing, you're probably going to be naturally picking up on some of these patterns, but I just want to cover some of the most common ones that you can use in almost every one of your drawings. When it comes to clothing, folds are incredibly hard to draw. Even when you're just looking at a reference, it's really hard to decipher what these folds actually look like. But luckily, there is a fold pattern that you're probably going to see people use very often as soon as you start paying attention to it. It's a simple overlapping fold where you can see the fold stick out from the rest of the fabric. There are different ways that you can do this, like for example, you can imply that there's an overlap, or you can very clearly show the overlap. This also depends on what kind of fabric it is. If the fabric is tight, it won't really create that deep of an overlapping fold, so in that case, we can use the implied overlap. Whereas if the fabric is loose, you'll get these very clear and deep overlaps. You can see artists use this particular type of fold a lot. Specifically, you'll see it a lot near the shoulders, you can see it a lot near the elbow, you can also see it a lot near the knees as well. You just have to think about in what area the fabric is going to bunch up, and then you can use this overlapping fold to illustrate it. For the body, there are also a lot of patterns we can use to simplify the anatomy. We can divide the arm into 3 sections. We have the shoulder at the top, then we get the upper arm, and then we get the lower arm. Simplified, we can kind of give it this chain-like design. So we have the shoulder muscles sticking out here, then we have the triceps and biceps sticking out at the front and back plane of the arm, and then we have the lower arm muscles sticking out on the side. Every single arm can be drawn using this pattern. If a character has less muscle mass, of course you shouldn't make the differences between the forms as drastic, but it still follows the same pattern. The legs can be treated the same way. At the top, we have the quad muscles, which stick out like this. And then on the lower leg, we have the calf muscle in the back, which creates a curve at the top, and then at the front, we have a straight edge. Also, the knee, which creates the transition between upper and lower leg, is curved on the inside, and on the outside, it's straight. Again, this pattern works for any type of leg, so you can draw this as a guide first, and then you can change it according to the character. The neck has a pattern as well involving the sternocleidomastoid muscle. This muscle goes from behind the ears down to the collarbones as well as the pit of the neck. And sometimes you can visibly see the volume on the surface. The sternocleidomastoid is also where the neck goes from its front plane to its side plane. So if we draw the sternocleidomastoid as our pattern, we can use it to get the perspective of the neck right. You can also pretty commonly see people use it as a way to figure out where the neck needs to attach to the ear. Another pattern that's used commonly is the way we connect the legs to the hips. We have the pelvis, which has kind of a triangular shape, and then the legs are attached to the side of it. The shape of the pelvis is a pattern we can use. When you're drawing the bottom of the torso, make sure that you have this shape, and that's going to allow you to very easily attach the legs. When it comes to hair, there are multiple different patterns we can use as well. If you want to draw braids, for example, a pattern would be to have this S shape all the way down, and then you would add a C shape on the other side. What you'll also see a lot are these curved shapes, and what's important is the way they're curved as well as how they overlap other forms. What people usually do wrong with these types of shapes is that they get the trajectory of the line wrong, or they don't overlap these forms correctly with other forms. So just remember, for this pattern to be correct, you need to pay very close attention to how you curve the line, and you need to think about these forms as existing in 3 dimensions so they can properly overlap other forms. Another pattern could be how the forms of the hair twist through space. You've probably heard about how you can treat the forms of the hair as if they're ribbons, so basically you would end up with a lot of overlap that looks like this. This is also a very common pattern, and you can just remember how this overlap works and then reproduce it. But in short, these patterns help you with simplifying things and actually getting your ideas across. To learn patterns like this, I would recommend studying other artists' work, and specifically, I would recommend studying animators' works. They have to draw the same character in very slightly different poses over and over and over, and they also have to get the most information across using the least amount of lines, and to do that, you really have to understand how these patterns work. Of course, you should also just practice normally instead of just studying these simplified patterns. Like for example, if you're studying a piece of clothing, study the folds in detail instead of just simplifying everything. So you kind of need to find a middle ground. But that's it for the video. Be sure to check out the Discord server, which is linked in the description, if you'd like to participate in our weekly homework exercises, which are also in this playlist. You can also support the channel through YouTube memberships, and then I guess I'll catch you all next time.